Oh, hi. How are you? I am using my Calcor hot wire cutter thingy to cut some foam because I am going to make a few hills tonight. And that's basically it. So if you want to watch along, you are more than welcome to. There's really nothing to this, and you could use a knife, absolutely. But I paid the money for this thing, which wasn't very much. I think it was like 12 bucks or something. And I'm going to use it. Plus, I like the way it melts the foam, and it actually makes it harder where it melts. The negative, as opposed to using a big craft knife, this is kind of slow. And if you push it too hard, you will break the end of that thing. And I know that from personal experience. So, Alexa, play Down in the Park. Alexa, play Down in the Park by the Tubeway Army.
I couldn't find Garment Park by Tubeway Army, but here is other music by Tubeway Army.
It's just... When I make these, I kind of try to make sure I leave enough area between the levels of the hill so that you can get at least 2 or 3 infantrymen up in there. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, that's also why I make them step. I grew up, of course, in Appalachia, so I know how hills actually work. But we're making game pieces. Alexa, volume 8. Alexa's a little loud.
Here's something I found on the web. According to onedropolis.org, to me too loud is when someone has headphones on and you can hear their sound from across the room or farther. Did that answer your question?
I didn't ask the question.
Thanks for your feedback.
Alexa, off. Are you talking to me, baby? Which Biden ad? At this point, I just feel bad for the guy. My wife likes interacting with me, which is good. So I'm going to leave the radio off in case she wants to talk some more. What are you watching in there, babe? Oh, so Halloween Wars. The commercials. Any good commercials? Yeah, I'll be glad when the election's over so we can go back to learning about tampons and douches instead of, well, douches. Friggin' making some hills for my war games. How's that make you feel? One of these days you're going to let me teach you how to play 40K, right? Silence. Crickets. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Well, if not 40K, how would you like to learn bolt action or chain of command? I hear the sigh, but I'm asking you if you would like to. I'm not saying I'm going to force you. I don't force you to do things. Much. Interesting things to bake. I like the idea of that. My wife is a great, I mean, seriously, like 10 out of 10 cooking. Yeah, maybe if I'm good tomorrow, you can cook those cookies with the heat bits in it. That would be pretty smoking hot. No? Well, if we're done talking, I'm going to put the radio back on, okay? I love you. All right, Alexa, play Down in the Park. Alexa, play Down in the Park by Marilyn Manson.
Here's Down in the Park by Marilyn Manson on Amazon Music.
Alexa, volume 5. They just trundling along, trundling along. Sometimes if you kind of give it a slice, they'll speed it up a little bit. The machines play kill by number. Down in the park with a friend called Five. Crasher was about a war, but I've never been quite the same. Little white lies like I was there. You know, and sometimes you just want to touch it up and round the corner off maybe a little bit. A thing when you're making terrain like this is there's really, I mean, this is just going to be a basic square piece. I mean, this is not a fancy thing. But there's really no wrong answers as long as it does what you want to do, which is either block line of sight or, you know, give your armies, yours and your opponents, something to stand on and shoot off of. That's kind of the thing. So to serve you. So as you can see, so that's basically the cut, but I don't like this piece right here. It's a little too pointy. Right. And when you use this thing, you end up getting threads, but now there are some very much more expensive ones that are much better. And I thought about buying them, but the fact of the matter is, I don't craft enough with styrofoam to justify a Proxen cutter. You know, so people like the guy on Black Magic Craft and stuff like that. I mean, that guy makes amazing stuff, but I just cannot. And there's two reasons. One is, again, I don't make enough stuff to justify the cost. Two, space would be an issue because I've already got a couple of 3D printers and everything out in the garage. And if I just take over the whole garage, then that might become an issue with my lovely bride. And another big one is that would be money I couldn't use to buy miniatures and games. I mean, priorities, man. Yeah, it's nice to have a bad high-end. It's nice to have a bad high-end tool, but if you're not going to use it a lot, whereas, at least in my opinion, miniatures are always a good investment. So this is what we're going to end up with. Again, super simple. And if I wanted to, I could shoot that over there and touch it up and have like a cliff. You know, I could do something like that and just make a cliff face and then have a bigger hill area here. And that's fine and dandy, and I may do that with another piece. But for this piece, I just want a hill that I can fight over, you know. Now, if a person wanted to, they could go 3-4 layers high and just make these massive hills. But the footprint gets exponentially bigger the taller it gets, unless you're making a cliff, at which point, you just put a cardboard box on it at that point. But I find 2, maybe 3 is sufficient, especially if you use this 1-inch pink foam, because, well, I'll explain why, if you didn't know. See right there? So 1 is going to be hardcover, heavy cover, whatever. You can seam, so in a true line of sight game, you can argue, yes, you can shoot at this guy, but he's got full cover. And 2, you're not going to see that guy at all. And I find in war games that having areas on a table that completely block line of sight make the game much more fun, because it rewards use of good movement tactics, and it allows you to maybe say you're playing a bunch of Khorne berserkers and you don't feel like you want to just charge headlong across an open table space into the mouth of an Imperial gun line or what have you. Having this terrain around allows an actual tactical guy who has a little bit of brains to take advantage of that terrain and get close enough maybe to land that charge without getting chewed up all the way across the table. All right. I'll just show you everything I'm using. Gorilla Glue, pink foam, that cutter. When this is done, it will be painted in craft paint. Probably this color right here. What is this? Hell, I don't even see what color this is. It's like a caramel color or like a really light. Okay, right here, territorial beige. We've talked about this. This beige is very territorial, so I have to keep it away from other paints. And but once I know where this is going to go, do not smear a bunch of glue on. I mean, unless you really want to, but I'll tell you right now, it wastes glue, it's inefficient, and if you get an airtight seal around the outside, it will take 10 years for that glue on, well, not 10 years. It'll take an incredibly long time for that glue on the inside to dry, and it will not make anything a darn bit more solid. So if you want to just save yourself some troubles, you put dots down. So I'll show you real quick. because this allows for airflow under this piece. Even though the gap is going to be so small, you probably won't even notice it. But since this does allow airflow, all the little dots under there will actually grab onto your material and will hold on to it better. So now we've got that. If I want to, I could do some more shaving here or there to try and make it look a little bit better, but I'm not going to, and I'm not going to, period. My reasoning being, this will be flocked. I'll go partially grass. I'll do the faces, maybe a brown, tannish earth tone, and maybe run some grass up some of them or whatever, and I'll put patches of rocks and whatever. It'll look okay. It's going to look okay. And I could fit like a whole 10-man squad of whatever around, anywhere around this. I could probably fit a 30-man platoon of IG on this hill. And so that's the right size, I think, for what I want. So, and as I said, I'd already built a smaller one, but actually, same footprint. So you throw these two. This one's got a bigger top than this, but, and you can just stack one on top of the other. If you wanted to, you could put an old book, like a phone book or something on top of that, and that would be fine, but all right, so now we got that. And what I think I'm going to do with this bad boy is, one, I'm going to use my handy dandy carpenter knife, and I'm going to cut the top and the bottom. So this is going to be 2. This is a lot easier to use if you're just cutting, see, a couple pieces out. So, and see, no problem. No problem. Now this guy, I'm going to make a cliff. So the first thing I'm going to go and do is line up a side. I'm thinking this side right here. So this is going to be the cliff. And do I want it to be a cliff all the way around? No, I don't. That would be too powerful. But I want it to be a cliff on 1.5 sides. So easy peasy. We bust out the knife. And I'm not throwing away these larger pieces. Like the little pieces I'm throwing away. But the larger ones I'm going to save, because I can use these to easily make like a tank position. Say I've got my KV-1, my badass Soviet heavy tank. I could draw a basic outline and say give it 1/4 of an inch into this thing, and then use my hot knife and cut that out, and then bevel the outside, throw a bunch of grass or snow or whatever on it, right? And instant defensive position for your tank. A lot of games allow you to do that. So, right. The other thing I could do with these pieces, and I really like it, and you see it, like my favorite game store does this, is you take some pieces about this big and you stack them up. Let me reach under my desk, right? But you can stack these guys up 4 or 5 tall, and you can cut them out, and then they look like those rock structures from the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, like you see out in the Painted Desert or whatever in Arizona. So you get about 4 of these. And again, they make really good, area terrain. Well, not area terrain, line of sight blockers. You throw them out there, and especially, they're easy to make. You make them out of scraps that you're going to use that, from what you're doing, whatever else. And you need about 4 or 5 of them to set up. And it's a whole area on your table that's very interesting to play and fight over. And that is, right there, that's the key. when you're building your table, the whole key is that you're trying to create an interesting battlefield. So that when people walk up or they come over to your house and you're like, hey, let's set the table up, you know. A lot of, I don't know if anyone has ever said this, and if they have, then I'm going to plagiarize them. And I'm going to say it. Especially in older editions of Warhammer, I haven't gotten my I haven't totally got my mind around 9th edition yet. I mean, so far I like it, but I haven't played. I've played 2 skirmish games with it, you know, 500 points, just to try and get the flow of it. And so far I like it all right, and it does seem like they fixed some stuff that I didn't like, even though my army was kind of nerfed out. But I'm glad. Space Marines are taking a real hit, and they needed to, because I was sick and tired of showing up at our local game stores and events. You know, every week or once a month, depending on when the events were, but every week when you just show up for open play and seeing the same 2 armies on the table, you know. The Space Marine list with the, not Contemptors, the, whatever the knights are. I have one behind me. You can see it just above my head, between me and my holy icon of Jesus Christ Pantocrator. So yeah, I bought one. And, I mean, does that make me a douchebag? Maybe. But let's be honest, there was a time period in this game during 8th edition where if you wanted to actually compete and win, you pretty much had to bring that. Or two. And that's just, you know, sadly, that's just the way it was. So I'm glad they fixed that. And if my army takes a little bit of a nerf, that's fine. You know, it's not always about having the most powerful army. Some people seem to think so, but, you know, in a war game, I like balance. In a role-playing game, I don't care, because the players shouldn't be fighting each other anyway. But in a war game, especially if you're going to play tournaments, see, historicals can get away with not going super hard on the balance issue because they are historical. So a lot of historical players aren't like, well, they're not like 40K players. Whether you think that's a good or a bad thing or anything. Now, Bolt Action kind of tries to make World War II into a game like 40K because you have points, costs, and they try to balance things out so that, you know, it's a game. But a lot of your hardcore war gamers, historical war gamers, and I've been involved in a couple of these games. Back in the day when I was young, like 19 maybe, the game that there were a couple of old dudes in my area that they were playing all the time was a game called Johnny Reb. And it was a 15 millimeter brigade level Civil War game. I'm sure you could use it with Napoleonics or whatever, but in this area at that time it was Civil War, and oh man, that game was a lot of fun. It had a really interesting phase for determining whether troops would break or not, and the crew I played with, you know, the game rules, when you fired your muskets, you would put little tufts of cotton ball in front of that unit. And not only did that, designate so everybody could see who had fired, but it actually affected the game. If you had tons of units just firing those black powder weapons off, you could literally reduce visibility on a battlefield to the point that no one could see who was, across the field from them. And I suppose that's historically accurate. One of my friends is a history teacher and Civil War reenactor, so he could probably tell you like the real details of this. But as a matter of fact, it was GameCon he was running where I was introduced to these old dudes that were playing. And this battle they were playing, I forget the particular one at the GameCon he was running. But it was a historic battle, which meant that there were no points. I think they were playing like the first day of Gettysburg or something. The map was massive. It was like 12 feet by 6 feet board with, model train quality terrain. Everything looked really good. And the miniatures were multi-based on sticks. And each stick, was so wide and so deep. And that represented a company or a battalion or brigade all the way up to a corps. And then you had your little officer figures that were mounted. You had your guns that were all mounted. And there, like I said, there were no points. The two gentlemen involved, the club involved in this game, they basically just got together and they said, we're going to fight this battle. Then they looked up, documentation from history, and they put those two armies on the field. And that's just how they did. So there was no balance in this game at all, especially because, during the Civil War, units were not all the same. Just because you had, say, the 11th Tennessee, 5th Alabama, 24th Maine, it's easy to think that these are all just guys with black powder weapons, but that is not the case at all. Some units were just renowned for certain things, like the 11th Tennessee was just renowned for their esprit de corps or whatever, and their ability to just charge into combat, bayonets fixed, and stab the hell out of somebody. Different Civil War units literally had different guns. That's another thing that rifles. My drill sergeant would kick my ass for calling it a gun, but that's another thing that people don't realize. They see the blue and the gray marching through Fredericksburg. They see black powder rifles or muskets, and that's the point. And they think everybody's got the same kind of weapons, and that is not true. And the weapons technology that was available to certain units over others was truly game-changing. The Union... All right, is this... Well, where are we putting this? Right there. That's where that goes. So this is what we're looking at this particular hill. So two sides will be impassable or cliff. Not impassable if I'm using this for 40K and you got jump troops on the table. They're just going to bounce over it. But, again, it'll just be an interesting thing. It'll get painted just like the rest. They'll all match. Maybe I'll get really psychotic with it and paint it in snow so that I can use it with my bolt action or chain of command. Stalingrad or winter World War II stuff. But again, like I said, you just put a couple of dots. Oh, don't know my own strength. Just a couple of dots. You do not have to spread this glue all over the place. Put a couple of dots about 2 or 3 inches apart, and that'll do it. That'll hold it just as good or better than if you were to coat the whole thing. Line her up. Give it a little push down. And set it aside to dry. So that's 3 hills done and me rambling on. But yeah, in historicals, when you play a game like that, um, there's no such thing as balance. Balance is whatever, you know. You're playing, I'm trying to think of a battle, but you say you're playing Civil War. Say you're playing the Union side, and you have a whole cavalry unit equipped with sharps repeaters. See, you didn't pay extra points for that in a game like Johnny Reb or Black Powder or whatever. You just said, "This is my unit. It's the whatever Pennsylvania, say, and they're all equipped with sharps repeaters, which means they have a much higher firepower level than an opposing Confederate force armed with Brown Bess muskets or Enfields or whatever." And again, in the Civil War era, there were literally dozens of different rifles being imported and produced by both sides. The Springfield and the Enfield were basic issue stuff, but you had the Virginia rifle, you had Kentucky long rifles, Sharps repeaters, just all kinds of other stuff. And if you were playing like a 40K game or a points based game, then you would be paying for the cavalryman, you would pay for his level of training, whether he was green or elite or whatever. You'd be paying for his weapon and gear. In a game like Johnny Reb or whatever, none of that matters because you pick a battle and you reproduce the units that were at that battle and the equipment they had. So certain battles, if you're playing First Bull Run as the Union forces, you might it might be kind of you're the underdog. If you're playing the Confederates at certain battles, you're the underdog, and that's just the way it is. So that's a war game thing. Um, Chain of Command, which is made by a game company called Two Fat Lardies, and it's World War II, but they actually make games for everything you can think of: Napoleon, American Civil War, which are about the same thing, really. Um, Revolutionary War, all of that. They make game sets for everything, and they're miniatures agnostic. So they make their game sets. See, this is a bolt action Panzer. Two Fat Lardies makes their game sets for use with multiple scales and any miniatures you want. They devote themselves just to making a game. And one of the things about their game is they don't use points. What it is if you choose to play an elite platoon, it's a platoon versus platoon game. So if you choose to play an elite platoon, say you want to play, I don't know, English commandos, U.S. Rangers, maybe Soviet Guards infantry mid late war when they got their shit together, German Panzer Grenadiers or SS, something like that. What it does is if your opponent has a lower level of veterancy, they get bonus supply points. And after you've made your platoon, and you just make it according to whatever they would have. So if you're playing U.S. Airborne, your platoon is going to be 2 to 3 squads, 12 men per squad. The sergeant will have a submachine gun. There might be a couple more submachine guns scattered in the squad, Tommy guns. And then you might have a bazooka team. You might have a 30 cal light machine gun in the squad, whatever, right? So you make your squad up, and your opponent, he makes his squad up, also based on historic orders of battle. And then you compare veterancy, like I said, and if there's a difference, then once this table's set up, you roll a die for support choices. And depending on how much you roll, and the guy with the lower veterancy or whatever, he gets a bonus to his roll. Each army has a whole list of things you can choose. And an example would be, I shouldn't have said and. See, I'm trying to work on my English. That's another reason I'm doing this. It's not just personal therapy and just talking. It's, working on speaking, which I'm terrible at. Let's say you're playing green Soviet riflemen, and you're going up against German SS, Grenadiers, something elite, like high end, right? He's going to have pretty much, generally speaking, as many infantry as you will. You're both playing platoons. I think the Russians will have more because their squads were 12 men or something like that. But where it really changes the whole way the game plays is you roll your dice and you add whatever your bonus is, and that gives you support points. And then on the Russian list, for like 2 points, you can get another 12-man squad of infantry. Or for, say, 6 points, you could get a T 34 or maybe some artillery or anything like that. It's kind of a weird way to play because you only halfway know what your army is going to be. And if you roll really crappy on support points, you could just be in trouble. Even with the bonus, you could be in trouble. You could go into the game the underdog. Just, it is what it is. If you roll a 1 on those support points, even with the bonus you get for the difference in veterancy, especially if your opponent rolls a 6 on his support points, because even though he's got a higher veterancy, he still gets to roll for support too. And now you are, you're going to throw out whatever you want. He's throwing out whatever, and the game is really super interesting in another way. Because you can use support points to buy minefields, barbed wire, different fortifications, support teams, be they MMGs, flamethrower teams, maybe anti-tank rifle teams or whatever. It depends on what time period you're playing. So if you're playing early war, you might be able to get a Russian anti-tank rifle team. If you're playing late war, you might actually get, Russian anti-tank team with a rocket launcher or something. Maybe they got stolen Panzer Faust, I think, or their own homebrew version of it. So that kind of makes the game super interesting because you never really know what your army totally is going to be, and your opponent doesn't either. But anyway, I'm going to stop recording this here, even though I might continue to BS around. I've got a model to build, and then bedtime. It's midnight. Oh, geez. But yeah, so it's a great game, and I'm pretty sure it's available in print. Chain of Command by Two Fat Lardies. I need to get mine in print. I got the PDF, but I need to get mine in print. And maybe I give my awesome comic shop a call tomorrow and be like, hey, and if they can't do it, then I'll have to go through some other, online dealer. But if they can do it, awesome, right? You got to keep those brick and mortar stores in business, or where you're going to play your games at. Right. So anyway. All right, YouTube. Peace and love.